With the U.S. presidential race heating up, both major candidates go on the attack. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. On Tuesday, voters in Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Kansas, and Ohio cast primary ballots in a lead-up to this year's presidential election, but the rematch between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump is already all but set. Both were on the campaign trail and had this to say.
If this election isn't won, I'm not sure that you'll ever have another election in this country.
Last week, Donald Trump and I clinched the nominations. We're going to beat him again.
To discuss the latest in the race for the White House and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us here in Washington, D.C., Adolfo Franco is an attorney and Republican strategist. From Maryland, Joseph Williams is a former senior editor at U.S. News and World Report. Also in the U.S. Capitol, Jacquie Luqman is the coordinator for the Black Alliance for Peace, D.C., and Eleanor Clift is a political columnist at the Daily Beast. Welcome to all of you. Eleanor, let me start with you. Let's start with the race for the White House, see what the state of play is right now. Several primaries held on Tuesday, as I said, but we already know that the two main candidates from the two major parties will be Joe Biden and Donald Trump. There's been a bit of a change over the past week, though. We've seen for a long time now that Joe Biden has been trailing Donald Trump in the polls, but this week we saw a change. There were three polls which were cited by Newsweek magazine showed that Biden would defeat Trump if the election were held right now. I mean, it is early days, but what do you make of these polls, and what do you think is pushing support for Biden right now?
Well, I think the polls are going to go back and forth a bit. I think some concern among Democrats that the race seemed like it was set in concrete. So I think it's really good news for Democrats that they are now seeing some movement in the polls, in part because Biden has aggressively been out there making his case, the State of the Union speech, several other appearances where he takes on the issue of age and jokes about it. And there's also a paid advertising campaign that's getting launched to try to inform voters how much this president has accomplished. Plus, the campaign is reaching out to various parts of the, I would say, the Obama-Biden coalition, people who have felt kind of disheartened and don't feel like they've gotten enough out of this White House and this president, to try to explain the change that President Biden has brought about, and to make the contrast as to what the next 4 years would look like under Biden versus under Trump's. So it looks like their arguments are beginning to get through, but I don't think either candidate can rest easy. This is going to be a very, very tight race.
Right, Eleanor, there was some concern expressed by Democrat operators and analysts earlier on the apathy factor, the fact that a lot of people will not come out to vote in the upcoming election. Do you think Biden is attracting those voters right now, probably motivating them to come out?
I think he's got to remind voters what he has done for them and what might be occurring in the future 4 years if he is not in the White House. So making that contrast, I think, is very important. And I think, Trump has gotten away with sort of portraying his 4 years in office like it was, there were no wars, there was no inflation. I don't think anybody wants to go back 4 years, which would be this time in 2020 when the COVID pandemic was setting in and we had a president who was in denial about the seriousness of the pandemic, and it was suggesting at one point that that people inject themselves with Clorox. So again, I think the contrast is just being made, and Trump is having some difficulties on his end with trying to find bond money to underwrite the money he owes as a result of his convictions. So again, the contrast is being made, and some Republicans are don't like Trump. Some Democrats don't like Biden, but the Democrats who don't like Biden dislike Trump even more. And so motivating voters in a positive way because of what you've done is one aspect of the campaign. It's also reminding voters, Democratic voters or leaning voters, how much they dislike Donald Trump. So it's going to be a lot of positive campaigning over the next 7 months and a lot of negative campaigning by both candidates. And I think the question is, will there be presidential debates in the end after they attack each other for 7 months? Do we really want an extra helping of watching them on the stage together? My answer would be yes. But let's see, we're not anywhere near that yet.
Right, okay, let's look at the situation in the Trump camp. Adolfo, Trump was in Ohio, he's been campaigning over there. Talking about polls, there was also polls published by the Hill newspaper, the political newspaper, which shows that Trump is leading in the states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. There's quite a few key states, swing states, in that list that I read out there. What do you make of his campaign so far?
Well, I have a completely different view than Eleanor, which shouldn't come as a surprise. First of all, you're absolutely right. He's leading in all of the critical battleground states, all of them. Of all those states, only one of those states was carried by Donald Trump, which was North Carolina. So this is a remarkable achievement for a challenger against an incumbent. That's first. Secondly, President Biden's approval rating right now on the real politics average nationally is 39%. That's lower than President George W.H. Bush had and lower than Jimmy Carter, who did not win, and by the way, Donald Trump at this time. And remember these shows in the past, we kept saying, oh, it's still a long way, it's still a long way. I keep hearing that week after week on this program. The election is, in many ways, the impressions are being gelled. The contrasts, I hope the contrasts that Eleanor makes reference to are made. There indeed was, Eleanor, under President Trump's presidency, low inflation. Under this administration, we ran for a period of time at 9% annual inflation, the highest in 40-some years. Again, I don't know anyone who thinks food prices are lower, gasoline prices are lower. Those are realities. On every major issue, whether it's the border, whether it's immigration policy, whether it's national security and inflation, President Biden is underwater and he's the incumbent. So that is just the absolute reality. On top of that, you have a problem he cannot overcome, and that is his age. This man, if he is reelected, will be 86 years old when he leaves the presidency. My Democrat friends, including Eleanor, which was on national television many years ago during the Reagan administration, was concerned about President Reagan's age when he was elected at age 68. So there is a difference between the two candidates. There's a vibrant President Trump at his age, and there's a person who's absolutely challenged cognitively and so forth, and that would only get worse. And that is completely what the American people are seeing. But the bottom line are the issues. And there are stubborn numbers that have been consistent since the Afghanistan debacle. This president has been in a decline. Lastly, with minority groups, African-American men, President Trump is now polling at 23%, 3 times what he did the last election. With Hispanics, I think there's a chance we'll win the majority of Hispanic voters. So the so-called base, we haven't even talked about Israel and what's going on in Gaza and so forth, which is hurting his left flank, as demonstrated what happened in the Michigan primary. You got a recipe here for a disaster for the Democrat Party.
Okay, Joseph, Adolfo mentioned there a moment ago the minority voters, the black voters, Latino voters, Asian voters as well. Democrats rely heavily on these minority groups during an election, but there was a poll that was done and published in Axios newspaper. It shows that the advantage that Democrats have had is shrinking, and it shrank to its lowest point in 60 years. In fact, there was one report in the Financial Times which said that young black voters do not find the Democrats appealing. How big a problem is this for Biden?
It's a significant problem, let's be honest about it. But I think that to Eleanor's point, and Adolfo may not like to hear this, but it is early. I mean, whether he wants it to be or not. And I think that as the campaign goes on, And as President Biden makes his case, and as President Trump, frankly, makes his case, I think a decision will be made. I mean, there's a reason why candidates always kind of try to court the young vote, but don't count on it. And that's because, by and large, young voters don't vote at the same rate as older voters do. And Biden does need those voters to come out because the race is going to be won at the margins. But I believe, or at least what I'm hearing, is that there is a long way to go. The Democrats are trying to make their case. I think, contrary to what Adolfo was saying, that there are a lot of issues that President Donald Trump is facing, a lot of headwinds, most notably several trials that are probably going to come up, if not actually take place, certainly issues around the trials like depositions and motions here and so forth, and a large headline that said Donald Trump was not able to make the bond that he needed to pay off all the fines and the judgments that are against him. I mean, that's going to hurt regardless. Again, President Biden, rather, is facing significant headwinds with minority voters. That can be rectified. Whether or not Trump's problems are going to be rectified in time for the election, I think that's still an open question. So I think that young black voters are still up for grabs as long as President Biden works for them. Whether he's going to be able to convince them, it's an open question.
Jacquie, I want to get to another point that Adolfo mentioned, and that was Israel and the situation in Gaza. Biden is losing support among Arab Americans, among Muslims in general, and also among young people in general because of his support for Israel as it continues what the United Nations has described as plausible genocide in Gaza. Arab Americans in Michigan, for instance, have launched the Uncommitted campaign, urging voters to vote uncommitted, to write in that. I mean, how significant is that voting bloc? And in the swing states, in the key swing states, like, well, Michigan's one of them, could it cost Biden the election?
It could, but I want to say that if that happens, and in my mind, I'm actually thinking more along of when that happens rather than if in some states, where no, young people are not going to vote for Joe Biden. A lot of black people are not going to vote for Joe Biden. Certainly a lot of Palestinian immigrants, Arabs, from all of the surrounding countries, probably not going to vote for Joe Biden. But I want people to understand that this is not because people don't care about voting or they don't care that they're going to have Donald Trump as president again. People refuse to vote for a president who is enabling a genocide, period. And it bothers me to no end as the descendant of oppressed people who still live in a white supremacist settler colonial project that still expresses some of that oppression and discrimination from centuries ago. We still live under it, whether people want to believe it or not. But it really galls me on a personal, almost cellular level, that there are very few, can probably count on one hand and not even all of the fingers, very few Democrats who will come out and say, I don't care which party you belong to, I don't care who you're the president of, enabling genocide is evil and it is wrong. And every politician needs to be saying that. Every journalist in this country needs to be saying that. But that's not happening because there's been a lot of great propaganda about the Zionist entity for years, to the point where the entire history of the creation of the state of Israel and the illegality of it is completely whitewashed, completely washed over by history. So people don't understand that what's happening in Gaza today, it didn't start on October 6th. It started a few months before 1948, if not a year, when the British government was helping to start the genocide against the Palestinian people in favor of the Zionists. So this issue with Palestine, where Biden is still sending weapons to a state that the UN has declared was an apartheid state already, was an occupation force already, but is now committing a genocide, and the UN has confirmed it. But Joe Biden says he is a Zionist, and he's never going to not be a Zionist, and he's building a a naval pier, a temporary pier, to deliver this minuscule amount of aid,
Right.
while he's still giving bombs to Israel to massacre the Palestinian people and to displace them from what's left of their land so they can't ever come back. No. Young people, Palestinians, a whole lot of black people, a whole lot of Arab immigrants, a whole lot of people in general who are decent human beings who don't want to live through a genocide, they're not going to vote for Joe Biden. And don't get excited, Republicans, because they're not going to vote for Donald Trump either.
Eleanor,
You're right about you might be right about the latter, but I hate to interrupt here. There you have it, my Democrat friends on this program. That's the conundrum that this president is in.
Yeah.
You might be right. They won't be voting for a Republican, but they're not voting for President Biden either. And that's been said.
Well, that's what I said. That's what I said.
Exactly. But many in the movement. Problem is, that's a significant block. If these people aren't voting, they were never going to vote for Donald Trump. Now they're not voting for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Add that crime and immigration, black discontent, which is quite large on economic issues, and Hispanics. You are talking about the Biden coalition here coming undone, much less reaching out to independents that are leaning toward President Trump. That is the reality of what's going on. You notice how the other guest pivoted to Donald Trump's legal problems, supposedly, which have only helped him throughout the last year and a half, because they can't address the issues. They can't talk about the issues because this administration has failed on foreign policy and on domestic policy.
All right, let me get to Eleanor.
Well,
Wait.
I'm sorry, really quickly.
Yeah,
really
quickly.
It's not like Trump has been better for us, for black people, for immigrants. Come on now, let's not act like Trump really cares about immigrants and he wanted to treat them fairly, because Joe Biden has continued the anti-immigrant policies of Donald Trump. And Biden has even said now that he wants Trump to come on to his team when he wins and solve the immigration problem together. People, black people, young people, hold on. Black people, young people, immigrants are angry with Joe Biden and Donald Trump. They're angry with Democrats and Republicans because people see now that the U.S. government, regardless of who is leading it, can find all the money to send to somebody else to bomb a bunch of people. But neither administration.
All right. Look, I will come back to both of you. I will come back to both of you. I need to get to Eleanor to get her view on this. Eleanor, how big a problem is Joe Biden's support for Israel going to be in the election? I mean, you know, we've heard from both you and from Joseph Williams as well, that there's still a long way to go, but I don't think people are going to forget what is happening in Gaza right now.
I don't think people are forgetting what's happening in Gaza. I think the administration is struggling to try to get the government of Israel to not further their campaign in Gaza, and they're a sovereign country. And we're not at the point where we're going to turn on an ally. It's a lot of complicated negotiations that have to be made. But Donald Trump just talked about how any self-respecting Jew who doesn't go all out in support of Israel and that they are somehow self-hating, bringing up sort of old tropes about divided loyalty between Israel and the U.S. by American Jews. So this is an important voting bloc. And if Trump thinks that this is how you win, and he's not going to make anybody who worries about Gaza happy. So we're talking about a binary choice here. Neither of these men are capable of delivering everything, either the far left ones or the far right ones. And the vast middle of this country is still open to looking at a vast array of issues, including climate change, which is an existential threat to the planet. And Donald Trump just pretends it doesn't exist. And that is a motivating factor for young people, as are reproductive rights. There are other issues here, and they will be dealt with over the coming months. And I think people will be listening to what the two candidates say and what each candidate will do in the future.
Joseph Williams.
People are kind of insulted with the idea that genocide is not as important as anything else. Like we can't talk about Biden enabling genocide, but we can talk about almost everything else. But we can't talk about the fact that he is doing that. And this is not a complicated issue in Israel. Genocide is not complicated.
Not everyone agrees
Land
with
theft
that
is
term.
not complicated.
Okay.
Settler colonialism is not complicated.
All right, Eleanor,
This
go
is
ahead.
simple.
I just said not everyone agrees with the term genocide. They certainly
Just
are
because
trying
people
to
don't agree with something, it
wage
doesn't mean it's not
war.
happening. You don't have to like what we're calling it, but when we're trying to eliminate a population of
dealing with
people, that's what it
international
is.
law.
Okay,
When
I
you're
want to get,
dealing with
all right, I want to get to,
genocide has specific meanings, and there's nobody.
And the International Court of Justice has said that they are probably committing genocide. All of the evidence shows, yes, they are, and they're going to take them to trial for it.
okay,
So,
I want to get,
so
I want to get
mad at me for calling it genocide, people in the streets for calling it genocide, or the UN and the ICJ?
All right, I want to get to Joseph Williams. Joseph Williams, you know, we hear a lot about what's going on in Gaza right now, what Israel is doing right there right now. That's the story that's grabbing the headlines. But you know, there was a piece in the New York Times which reports that Biden's biggest weakness when one looks at the electorate is not actually Gaza, but the economy and immigration. I mean, to what extent will the election be decided on these issues? There are many who say that Biden is not connecting with voters when it comes to the economy. And when you look at it right now, there's full employment, inflation is coming down, there is growth. I mean, there's some negatives as well, as Adolfo told us earlier on. But what's going on here?
What's going on is the classic disconnect between what the data says and how you feel. Regardless, people are going to vote on how they feel. I mean, we have people with some very strong feelings talking about how they're going to vote and how they're not going to vote. And I think the economy is going to loom large. I think that people feel like things are getting better, but not good enough. They feel like the economy is headed in the right direction, but not quickly enough. It all matters when you go to the grocery store and eggs are $5 more or a couple of dollars more than they used to be. Gas is 35, 40 cents more than it was last week. Those are things that are beyond a president's control. I mean, I think the old trope is that when the economy is good, a president takes credit. When it's not his fault. When none of it really is under the direct control of the White House. A lot of factors are in play, not the least of which is the situation among the Houthis, firing at ocean liners, tankers bringing oil to the consumers. So it's going to be big. There's still time. We will see what happens.
Adolfo, let's get to another story that's been taking up quite a bit of the political oxygen this week. And in a word, bloodbath. The former president, Donald Trump, used that term in a campaign speech, and it set off a firestorm. That firestorm's been weaponized now by the Democrats, who allege that by using that word, he's calling for violence. But let's listen to part of what he said.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars. They're building massive factories.
So, Adolfo, was that a blunder on the part of Donald Trump to use that term? I mean, he is talking about the auto industry there, but he used the word bloodbath.
Well, the blunders are the part of the press, and with all due respect to even this program, because you just corrected it in part. You started in part. I can take anything we have said in this program in part and misrepresent what the conversation was about. Previous to that, as you alluded, the conversation was about electric vehicles and imposing 100% tariffs on China. And if that isn't done, there's going to be a bloodbath in terms of a trade war with China, which is our #1 competitor. That is what the president was referring to and talking about. Now, you can take it totally out of context, as other things have been with Donald Trump, to use it. Good luck. It's a reality that China is in fierce competition with us, and if this president is elected, he's going to stand up to China. So I'm all for having that used. It's not what people are misconstruing it and frankly lying and applying something that the president never said. So I think that's the bottom line on this.
Right.
I do want to correct quickly something that's been said on here, Joseph, where he says, well, you know, the data is different, but everybody's paying more for eggs. Those were your words. People are paying 35, 40% more gas. Whoa, wait, you're making and if you look at the underlying numbers of where people, these jobs that are being created, they're largely government jobs. That is not only are people not feeling, that's a reality.
Yeah.
Secondly, immigration is topping in all the polls.
Yeah.
In every state, and remarkably, even Democrats, Eric Adams and in cities are criticizing this administration. And immigration is at the top of the poll. And I've been around a long time, like Eleanor. You know, in 1992, Democrats certainly argued when Bill Clinton was elected that George H.W. Bush was responsible for the economy. That's just the way it goes, my friend.
Yeah.
When you're in power and you've had 4 years of disaster, as this administration has in terms of its policies, that's the result. When you have success like Donald Trump, he will say, are you better off?
Yeah, I am rapidly running out of time, and I want to get Joseph to get his response. Joe, go ahead.
Well, I think that the numbers are the numbers. Adolfo can spell it however he wants, but I do also make the distinction between what the data looks like and how people feel. And I think there's a definite distinction. So I think that's all you can actually say is that people are not feeling what the data reflects. Unemployment was high. It's not high anymore. Jobs were being created. Not enough jobs are being created. People are able to move between jobs. Wages have grown. The data shows all of that. But people are not feeling it when they come home from the grocery store or when they fill up at the tank. That's because you have variables that are beyond the control of economists. And that's the distinction that I was making.
Okay, Eleanor, I want to get Eleanor in this. Eleanor, what is your view on Donald Trump's use of the word bloodbath? I mean, the speech, if you look at the whole speech and you look at that particular paragraph, he was talking about the future of the auto industry, and supporters think he did use the term bloodbath in that context.
Yeah, he said that would be the least of it.
Yeah.
And then he follows it up saying that he would pardon the hostages that are being held because of January 6th. You know, we know what real hostages are. They're being held by Hamas in Gaza. The people who are facing trials for illegally entering and breaking into the Capitol are not hostages. Okay. And so he says he knows exactly what he's doing. Okay. He uses language to incite the people who believe in him. Yeah. And just as he incited the Proud Boys during a campaign debate.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt.
That's what he's doing, and everybody gets the message.
Okay, Eleanor, I'm going to have to interrupt you there. I'm sorry, but we've run out of time. We are going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.